Hey, to celebrate, how about we play a little old-school double dribble?
Okay, but no stupid shots from the corner, because that's a glitch in the software.
Game on!
Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket.
Oh, you dropped something. I think I'll head over in this direction. Corner 3!
Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
That's right. Welcome in. This is the Corner 3 here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. Also streaming for you worldwide on 93.7 The Ticket social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, as well as Allo Channel 961. I am Austin Oerman with you, as always, here for this little college basketball ditty that we call the Corner 3. No text line for you tonight. 402-464-5685, the normal number for you to get in touch with the show as we're going live, but it's not live, as you can see if you're watching, because myself and Tristan Gomes actually out calling high school hoops tonight as you're listening. They'll be coming up live right after this podcast is done. Airing for those of you who are catching the recorded version, the podcast edition. Hey, this is business as usual for you. So you know how to get a hold of me at Austin_Oerman on Twitter. As always, the best way to go about that. Busy week in college basketball. Lots to get to here just in the news in the first segment. We'll get to the one-time transfer portal window, a big betting scandal that just got blown open the other day, and talk a little bit about how a proposal from college football could, might, or should affect college basketball. In the second segment, we'll do the Big Ten's, halfway, midway point of the season, all transfer team. Of course, we're only about 30% done with the conference schedule at this point, but we've seen enough games, I think, at the midway point of the season overall that we can start putting together a Big Ten all-transfer team. If you listen to The Drive, I'm not trying to rip off Nick Sainert if he was thinking about doing this, but conversations with him and some other people had this on my mind. So we'll do our Big Ten all-transfer team coming up in the second segment and then finish up with some news and notes from the week. Once again, follow the show. Stay up to date, and reach out with any comments, questions, concerns, as always, at Austin_Oerman. All right, so the big news in college basketball from this week is that there was a new proposal from both the men's and the women's side of things to change the transfer portal window. No fall window, no spring window. Now we're going to have one window. Just reading from ncaa.org, it says, at the recommendation of the men's and women's basketball oversight committees, the transfer window in men's and women's basketball will open for a 15-day period the day after the championship game for the respective NCAA tournament. The changes are effective immediately. Let's go ahead and start with that. That's a big change. For the last few years, what we've seen is the transfer portal opening in the spring while the NCAA tournament is going on. Specifically, the end of that second weekend into the third weekend, the Elite Eight and beyond, is when the transfer portal has typically been open. And I used to think it was just such a dumb idea to have that be the way the system was. I kind of came around to understanding why it could be there and why it could work. But at the end of the day, I do think that this is probably the best change. I mean, if you're a coach that's in the Elite Eight, the Final Four, or the national championship game, it's not fair to your current team, and I don't think it's fair to your fan base to be so concerned about next season in the transfer portal as you're focusing on the biggest game or games of your team's season. I think that it's a good change to let everyone, let the leaves fall where they may, let the season settle. And then even if it is the next day, right, with the national championship being on a Monday, even if it opens, like it says here, the day after the championship game, so the Tuesday, right, that probably second Tuesday, maybe first Tuesday in April, depending on where the championship game falls. If that's when the transfer portal is going to open, that's when it's going to open. No rest for the weary, right, for those teams that have played in the Final Four in the national championship game and have the transfer portal opening up right now. But you can't tell me it's healthy for the sport. You can't tell me it's healthy for coaches. You can't tell me that it's healthy for rosters to have to be making Zoom calls to potential prospects out of the transfer portal instead of game planning for what should be the biggest marquee showcase event for the sport. We get it. We have these Feast Week tournaments, right? Players Era Festival. Maui's always been big. Paradise Jam, Battle for Atlantis, what have you. You have the Champions Classic. You had your ACC, SEC challenges, your Big Ten, SEC challenges back in the day. But plain and simple, those aren't the same caliber of highlight for the sport that the final weekend of the tournament is, right? Think about how many millions of people fill out a bracket each year. Think about how many people have their office pools come down to the Final Four, the last 4 games of the season in the Elite Eight and beyond. The last 7 games, I guess it would be, but don't hold me to that math. That's a chance for, diehards of the sport to really dive into what should be the highest level hoops of the year. It's a chance for the casual viewer to sit back and enjoy the spectacle of college basketball with, again, what should be the highest level of hoops that college basketball has to offer. And I don't think it's doing right by the fans of those programs, of those teams, of those coaches to say, hey, we want you to put on this big spectacle, go out and give us a good show. Here's a great reward for all your hard work is getting a chance to win a national championship. Oh, and by the way, you have to start worrying about next year. Don't be in the moment. Don't soak it in. Don't enjoy the experience and put your nose to the grindstone to finish out this season strong. You have to do that and find ways to be competitive next year. Compete for top players to maintain your standing. Oh, I mean, you can't do both? What do you mean? I mean, aren't your staffs big enough? Can't you send guys to campus? Well, no, they would say, because guess what? I want to meet them. I want to meet them face to face. I want to have the Zoom call. And I think for every sane, rational coach, the here and now took precedence of, yeah, I mean, we want to be competitive. We have to be competitive in the transfer portal in some programs' cases to maintain our standing. But it isn't fair to this team, right? I don't feel like I'm doing the right thing by ignoring this team or taking a break from the team in front of me just to worry about next year's team with the future yet to be written. So I do think that overall it is probably the right change and one that I can support to move the transfer portal opening window to the day after the national championship game. That way you have, guys maybe from these championship teams, probably bench guys more often than not, being ready to hit the road and transfer. They're not worrying about it, where you don't have situations, like a Bo Pribula back in the day for Penn State, right? Backup quarterback, not getting much run, wants to put his name out there, misses Penn State's run to the college football playoff semifinals a couple of years ago. I do think this is a good change to prevent that. That's the angel on my shoulder. I think overall that's a positive change. I don't know if it's the little devil or what it is on my other shoulder, but the argument that I could have made for the window opening, during the Elite Eight and making these, Final 8 programs or Final 4 programs, even the Final 2 programs, have to split their attention is that's the price of success, right? You can either focus on next year because guess what? Your season's done and there's nothing left for you really in this 25-26 season in this example. Or you can focus on, hey, we're all in on now because we have to be. We have a chance to win a national title, and this group deserves our full effort and focus. But then the more I think about it, we don't or we shouldn't want good teams paying a quote-unquote good team tax. We don't want to punish success, right? Now, do we want parity? Do we want to give more teams the opportunity to compete? I would say absolutely. I think the more wide open March Madness feels at the beginning and the more it whittles down to, maybe a Cinderella or two in the Elite Eight, certainly a handful in the Sweet 16, and then, big, powerful blue blood names in the Elite Eight, Final Four, and beyond. I think that's generally the best mix for college sports. But then you get years like this year, right? A team like Vanderbilt, even a team like Nebraska, who was playing, in the Elite Eight and the Final Four in that same time frame in the college basketball crown last year. You look at a Miami of Ohio, for example, right? Teams like that haven't made runs that far ever, if at all, especially in Nebraska's case, but we don't have to relitigate or get into that here. teams like that are ones that I think are more often than not dependent on the transfer portal instead of grabbing highly prized plug-and-play high school recruits, and also fan bases that would deserve to enjoy a run to the second weekend or beyond. I don't think it would be fair for Fred Hoiberg in Nebraska. I don't think it would be tops of Husker fans' minds to know that even if Nebraska is not a huge player in NIL and rev share dollars, a team that's going to need to dip into the transfer portal again, fans don't want to care about that. The coaches don't deserve to care about that when the school could be making history. And in fact, it would be making history if Nebraska were to make it to the second weekend. I mean, shoot, advance to the second game in your little regional pod, and that's making school history. We don't want to punish teams like that have their miracle year, their Cinderella year, and say, oh, well, you're relying on the transfer portal. Well, some of those guys that you wanted to talk to, sorry you weren't pulling double or triple duty sometimes. That's your loss. No, we can't punish teams for preparing for the game in front of them and trying to put on the best show for college basketball. But I also don't want to, prohibitively punish some of these bigger name schools that have made runs more consistently, right? I think about a program like Houston, who's done a good job of high school recruiting and then supplemented with transfers, like Milo Zuzan from Oklahoma back in the day. Back in the day, he's still playing, but when he transferred in. Houston's made deep runs. Purdue hasn't really relied on the transfer portal much until this year, but they've been good recently. Iowa State has been a bit of a transfer portal program, right? Kentucky, Kansas, Duke in their own ways have made varying degrees of runs. UConn has become a relatively big portal program, especially for key contributors up and down the list, right? Florida, Alabama, we can name all sorts of teams, Gonzaga as well. I don't think it's fair to the best teams in the sport, the ones that are doing a lot of the work to carry the standard for college basketball, to go in with maybe not a full hand tied behind their back, because maybe some players would say, hey, pump the brakes. I'm just going to sit and wait and see if any of these schools are interested in me. I'm sure there have been, in plenty of cases, at least some preliminary conversations between these big name schools and guys in the portal. But, for every talented player that just wants the first bag available, I'm not sure if there's an equally talented player or similarly talented player that's willing to sit and wait for that call, right? There's usually a rush at the start of the transfer portal. There's usually a second rush then about midway through, and then news starts trickling in from there of where players are leaving and of where players are going. So I'm sure plenty of those top programs have done some of their work ahead of time, have their big boards put together, right, of players they'd be interested in that are transferring, or if they do transfer. I would never dare insinuate that any of these top programs would ever tamper to get someone to leave their previous school to join the bigger name. But for the teams that are making a Cinderella run, it's not fair to ask them to split attention and take focus and shine off of the school history that's being made. And even for the big name schools, I think it's good for college sports that the big name schools remain good, that drive the TV ratings, right? I'm not saying they have to win the national championship every year, right? I'm not making the SEC or the Big Ten argument about, well, if we don't get 4 or 5 of our teams, in the college football playoff, the sport's broken. No, the conferences and these teams have to earn it. That's part of the beauty of March. But I do think it's hard to argue that it's better for college basketball when your blue bloods get knocked down, right? Kentucky struggling isn't good for the sport. Kansas, being up and down isn't good for the sport. It's kind of cliche to say, but the sport is better when those teams are good. UCLA, I think that's fair as well for a West Coast presence, right? Duke has mostly avoided the up and down nature, right? I mean, John Shire's making some ACC history, and obviously Duke drives a lot of TV ratings for the 4-letter network. So I would hope that in consideration for the fan bases, for the players who are experiencing the ride of a lifetime, for the coaches who want to just focus on the moment, for the administrations that want to support them, and really just for the good of the sport overall, I think that the 15-day period opening after the national championship game is the fairest thing for everyone involved, from Team 1 down to Team 366. What wouldn't be fair would be a 9-game redshirt rule in college football compared to the 1 second, redshirt rule in college basketball. The AFCA, American Football Coaches Association, proposed earlier this week that college football players be allowed to play in 9 games and still preserve their red shirt. That's right. You could sit out the entire non-conference at the beginning of the year, play in all 9 of your conference games if you're a Big Ten team, and the bowl game or any postseason games, and not have a year counted against your eligibility tally. That, to me, absolutely asinine. Do not understand that proposal at all. It's like they wanted to do 5-5, but saw some legal challenges coming and didn't think they could get away with it. So they proposed that wacky, crazy rule instead. I don't understand it. I don't like it. And I really don't like it for college basketball, where as soon as you touch the floor in a non-exhibition setting, your red shirt's burned. As soon as you set foot in a single rotation in volleyball, your red shirt is burned. That's a problem. There needs to be some consistency across sports. And if the college football coaches can get away with it, more power to them for proposing that and finding a way to make it work. But I think that's dumb. The transfer portal has been confusing enough. The transfer portal is busy enough. And we're still dealing with some of the fallout from players from the COVID year, that simplifying and streamlining what it means to be eligible in college sports, specifically in this case, college basketball, needs to be the priority of decision makers' minds. It's got to be front of mind. It's got to be a top line item sort of topic, because it doesn't need to be that complicated, right? I think that there is some value in the simplicity of, if you play a year, you lose a year. You know, if you appear in a game, okay, sorry, I mean, you made your choice. You could have sat out, as tough as it was. And yes, injuries happen. That guys might be thrust into action unnecessarily early or against the plan. So I do think that some wiggle room, right, of giving guys the opportunity to get their feet wet, get a taste of what the college basketball game is like, is a good idea for the health of the sport, right? I think for every, hotshot freshman that says, oh yeah, I got this, no big deal, I'm just going to come out and ball, there's a coach that would willingly throw them out there against high major competition to open their eyes and say, oh, that was not what I was expecting. I was not ready for that. I think that would help potentially in player retention. If we're also concerned about the transfer portal and the constant movement of players, then we need to find incentives for these players to stay at their current schools. A good way, I think, to do that would be to give them an opportunity to see what it looks like and how they feel in the system that they were recruited to. I think it would make a lot of sense to give college basketball and college football players a similar proportion of the schedule to play without losing a red shirt. Right now in college football, it's 4 games, which for most conferences ends up being the 3 non-conference games and 1 conference game before you get to the bowl game, where red shirts don't matter. You can retain eligibility even if you play in the postseason. If we transpose that onto college basketball, you're essentially giving players, 10 or 11 games. And right now, college basketball schedules, the vast majority of them are 31 games. There's going to be an option to go up to 32 games next year. I'm not sure every team will take it. I'm sure a bunch will, and just add a cupcake home game in there, and then maybe try to find one more challenging non-conference game than you would have in years past. But I do think that a fair compromise proposal in the middle for college basketball would be, instead of losing your red shirt as soon as you set foot on the floor, you can play in as many non-conference games as you like. And then once conference play comes around, once you touch the floor in a conference game, then it counts against your red shirt. You lose your extra free year, and that's that. This is where it would get maybe a little tricky in the Big Ten, because the conference has gone to that kind of split scheduling model where teams will play 9 of their non-conference games. They'll get a head start on conference games before Christmas, play the 2 remaining non-cons right around Christmas between then and the new year, and then really dive into the rest of conference play after the new year. I would just do conference games or non-conference games, or just change it to you can play up to 11 games throughout the year. I would rather have that decision be made earlier in the year. I think if I was a player, to be able to sprinkle those games throughout like football makes a little bit more sense just because there are fewer games. I think for college basketball, there'd be an argument to say, okay, let's just see what you got at the beginning of the year. If you really need to save a game or two for conference play just in case of emergency, I could be talked into that argument. But I would think that by the time you get to conference play, you should have your rotation nailed down, barring injury, of course. And so I think coaches would also like that option to say, yeah, we'll give you a shot in the non-conference. We'll see how you look. We haven't scheduled overly tough, but we have some good challenges. Let's see how you respond and see if we want to burn the red shirt. Let's see if we can just get you some live game reps knowing that we don't plan to use you in conference play and you keep the red shirt anyways. I just think being able to sprinkle those games throughout the year, while it might be beneficial for the players or for coaches to have in their back pocket, in case of injury, in case a leap happens in the developmental realm and a player can help a team, it would be nice to get the most out of them. Say Braden Frager last year, right? If he was able to play in 11 games, if he comes in and sparks Nebraska to a win or two, I don't know, maybe against like a Rutgers or a USC at home, Minnesota, someone like that, if he could have been sprinkled into those conference games, I think that would have been a big benefit for him to see the floor, a big benefit for Nebraska to maybe have a spark and win those games. But again, I just go back to it just needs to become simpler for anyone to look at a roster and understand who's eligible and who's not eligible. It just cannot continue to be this difficult to decide, okay, well, this guy's a senior, but is he still going to be able to appeal for 2 more years? He's a freshman, but he's 25 years old, so how does that work? And I think that the simplest, straightforwardest, easiest to track way for college basketball is you can play in the non-conference games in any postseason without burning your red shirt. But conference games, I think, would be off limits in a lot of these cases. And then, sure, I'm sure you would face some tough choices in the rotation if a player goes down due to injury. Who's the next man up? Do you want to burn the red shirt that you wanted to preserve, or do you go to a deeper bench guy and give them an opportunity? There's always a chess match. Decisions always have consequences. But I do think it's kind of ridiculous that the college football gets 33% of the season for free, potentially up to 75% of the season for free. But college basketball, it's you set foot on the court, you might not even log a whole minute, but your red shirt is gone. I know Nebraska went through that with Leo Curtis earlier this year. They just wanted to see him in action. So what was potentially a redshirt year is now counting against Leo Curtis's eligibility. So really interesting stuff there. The other piece of news, this first segment might end up going a little long here, is a betting scandal that broke in college basketball. Some indictments were unsealed. There is a Nebraska tie here. That's Kevin Cross. Yeah, from Fred Hoiberg's first team, Kevin Cross was contacted by some fixers and asked to help in the efforts to fix the games. And you know what? Guess what he did? Trying to find the exact information here. Just for the Nebraska fans listening to this podcast about Kevin Cross, let me just read it. In or about mid-February of 2024, the Fixers recruited for their point-shaving scheme defendant Kevin Cross, a forward on the Tulane University Green Wave men's basketball team. In FaceTime communications, the defendants offered bribe payments to defendant Cross to underperform in and influence an upcoming game between Tulane and East Carolina University. Defendants explained to Cross that he needed to ensure that Tulane did not cover the spread in the East Carolina game, and that if the scheme succeeded, the Fixers would pay Cross approximately $30,000. Cross agreed to participate in the scheme. On or about February 18th, 2024, Tulane played against East Carolina at the Minges Coliseum in Greenville, North Carolina. East Carolina was favored to win the game by approximately 2.5 points at sportsbooks throughout the U.S. and elsewhere. Before this game, the Fixers and others acting at their direction placed numerous wagers with sportsbooks totaling at least approximately $140,000 on East Carolina to cover the full game spread. Defendants and others involved in the scheme communicated via text about their wagers on this game. Yada, yada, yada. Moving on. In the game between Tulane and East Carolina, defendant Kevin Cross underperformed in and influenced the game as he had agreed. He scored 6 points in the game, well below his season average. East Carolina defeated Tulane 81-67, covering the full game spread, and the Fixers won their bets. Shortly after this game, the Fixers arranged to deliver approximately $30,000 in cash to defendant Kevin Cross as his bribe payment for fixing the East Carolina game. There was another game that he was contacted about, a game against Florida Atlantic. Money actually got lost as Tulane covers the spread. Florida Atlantic does not. And so Kevin Cross went essentially 1 for 2 is what it's being proven in terms of his ability to fix these games. So, yeah, Kevin Cross named and being indicted in this investigation into betting in college sports. And from Matt Norlander of CBS Sports, he tweets, "These dopes were out here collectively wagering hundreds of thousands of dollars on Tulane and Northwestern State and thought they would avoid the feds." He points out there was another game that $242,000 were bet on Duquesne to cover the first half spread. On and on and on. And I saw this then from Amanda Kristovich, who's writing for Front Office Sports. She says, "Going through the federal indictment of 20 people into a college basketball scheme now, unsurprising but wild to see this in print. The organizers of the gambling scheme specifically targeted players who knew they weren't making a ton of NIL money." From the indictment, the Fixers targeted for their scheme NCAA basketball players for whom the bribe payments would meaningfully supplement or exceed legitimate NIL operations. The Fixers also generally targeted for their scheme players on teams that were underdogs in games and sought to have them fail to cover the spread in those games. Think about that Kevin Cross example. East Carolina favored by 2.5. Tulane's the underdog. It's easier. It's harder to detect when you play bad as the underdog when you're not expected to win. People are more likely to write it off. That makes sense to me. As does targeting players that might not make the most in NIL. You know, Norlander throws out this list: 17 schools with players or former players alleged to have participated in fixing games: Abilene Christian, Alabama State, Buffalo, Coppin State, DePaul, Eastern Michigan, Fordham, Kennesaw State, LaSalle, New Orleans, Nichols, North Carolina A&T, Northwestern State, Robert Morris, St. Louis, Southern Miss, and Tulane. We know all about what went on at New Orleans. Some of those players have already been charged. Some of the players that were named in this are still playing college basketball, not a whole lot of them. 4 of them, Simeon Cottle, Carlos Hart, Kamian Shell, and Umar Qureshi, have played for their current teams in the past week. ESPN says the allegations against 3 of them come from their previous schools, while the other one had the incident in 23 and 24. None of the allegations involve anything going on this year. So most of this seems to be in the rearview mirror. But if you're a coach at one of these smaller programs that's a historical underdog that people kind of forget about and that doesn't have much NIL money, I can understand where you would be worried for your players being, targeted by these fixers, by these schemers and scammers to say, hey, you guys are bad, you're going to lose anyways, but just go ahead and keep losing and make it a bigger spread. Just make sure that you tank your team's efforts to win. Always despicable, always horrible. But if you're not getting NIL money and you're not having team success, I can understand the temptation to make a quick buck if you're a player, right? Or in Kevin Cross's case, Tulane not investing that much in men's basketball. Hey, play bad in a game that you're not favored to win. Here's $30,000. That's a heck of a payday. Heck of a payday. And then the Florida Atlantic game from the indictment, the Owls end up failing to cover the spread. Kevin Cross scores 14 points, still below his average. It's just too bad to see a former Husker get picked apart by that. And speaking of former Huskers potentially in trouble, Matt Abdelmassih got fired from St. John's, and there are rumblings of improprieties up there, but we're still waiting for more information. But it makes sense why the scammers, the schemers, the fixers targeted the schools and the players they did. But now, like Norlander said, you're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars on these teams. That's when it starts to look fishy. No risk it, no biscuit. Put the money on them, and you got to win those big sums, I guess. But, man, it seems like college sports is starting to get a handle on this with a little bit of help from the FBI. And hopefully it's in the rearview mirror, never to pop up or rear its ugly head again. Let's take a break here. Let's talk transfers in the Big Ten. My Big Ten all-transfer team, who have been the best additions from out of the transfer portal. We'll do that when we return to the Corner 3.
Winter is just around the corner. Is your vehicle ready? Don't get left out in the cold. At A1 Automotive, we prep your car for whatever winter throws your way here in Nebraska. For battery checks, to brake inspections, tires, heaters, whatever your car needs to keep you and your family safe on the road, we've got you covered. A1 Automotive, always honest answers.
In a world where Wi-Fi battles rage and bandwidth is never enough, one family dares to connect it all. Work from home, influence all day, stream all night, and game to win. Deadlines, downloads, and dance-offs, all happening under one roof, flawlessly. Can your internet provider do that? Fiber fuel your household at allofiber.com/all-in.
Mike, I've been thinking our house could really use a makeover. How about new siding?
I've been thinking the same thing. Have you heard of James Hardy?
Yes! Sarah down the street had Roofing Service Company install James Hardy siding on their home, and they love it.
Roofing Service Company does have great reviews.
They took her through the design process and made everything super easy.
Roofing Service Company offers expert design and installation. Couple that with James Hardy's durable products and variety of colors, you and your family will love your exterior remodel. Just visit roofingservicecompany.com. That's roofingservicecompany.com.
Hey there, this is Paul Scheel, owner of High Electric. I want to thank our friends and loyal customers and introduce High Electric to those looking for a new electrician. We've been serving the Lincoln and Omaha area for over 30 years, from design to install, upgrades and repair. If you are a homeowner or a small business needing some electrical work, call us at 402-466-6606 or check us out at hyelectric.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Big value and big flavor meet at Wings and Rings thanks to the all-new Delicious Duo Combo. This is the one you've been waiting for. Get one half-sized appetizer and 2 entrees with a side for only $19.99. Bring a friend for the best deal in town on any day of the week, during game time, or whenever the heck you want. Their made-to-order wings and chicken sandwiches are waiting for you at their 68th and O and 40th and Old Cheney locations. Stop by Wings and Rings and celebrate every day with the best meal deal in town.
Rick Heyman here from Sartor Heyman Jewelers. I want to personally thank our great customers for voting us once again the best of Lincoln. At the same time, we're celebrating our 120th year in business in the great state of Nebraska. You can count on Sartor Heyman for the very best quality, value, and customer service. When it comes to your jewelry needs, visit us at South Point, Grand Island, and the Outlet in downtown Lincoln. Visit us today at sartorheyman.com, and thank you for your continued trust after all these years.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now I'm playing for real.
Hey, you're doing pretty good. What play should I call now? Maybe Corner 3!
He's hot. He is hot. Keep feeding that guy. Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Corner 3 rolls along. I am indeed your host, Austin Oerman. The joys and the beauty of doing a show that's recorded ahead of time and not live is that when I go to break and I have a sec to catch my breath and I scroll Twitter as this betting scheme scandal news is breaking, is you start finding out that there are more and more and more layers to this than you might have ever guessed. So the 4 players that I mentioned, Cottle, Hart, Shell, and Carese at the previous segment. So Simeon Cottle is averaging 20 points a game and was the preseason Conference USA Player of the Year and just got indicted. Okay, that's a pretty notable thing. You're your preseason Player of the Year, potentially getting kicked out of the Player of the Year race for a decent Kennesaw State team due to this. Now, not happening at Kennesaw State, but happened in the past. And then there's this from the script. During the game on March 5th, 2024, defendant Jalen Smith texted one of the fixers to complain that one of the players who was not involved in the point-shaving scheme was playing well and needed to chill out. The fixer texted Jalen Smith back during the game and assured him that the DePaul players involved in the scheme were keeping the ball away from that player and preventing him from scoring. Defendant Jalen Smith said that if ETN and the players keep to the plan, the bag would be on the way. Okay, so that DePaul team, this is in 2023-24, throwing games, right, have plenty of players that are on the docket for that. Well, that 2023-24 team went 3-29 overall, went 0-21 in the Big East, and beat Kenny Payne's Louisville by 7. They were actively trying to lose, and they beat Kenny Payne by 7. One potentially final nail in the coffin that I didn't know the Kenny Payne era at Louisville needed. All right, with that out of the way, my Big Ten all-transfer team. A lot of these names are going to make sense. A lot of representation from the top of the league, which you would assume. Some of these numbers are going to come from Evan Miyakawa, just his BPR sort of ratings, and some of these have been among the best players in the country, certainly in the Big Ten Conference, which is where we're going to go. To me, right now, the Big Ten Player of the Year, best player on the best team, and also a transfer, would be Yaxel Lendeberg from Michigan. Got a 7.7 offensive BPR, a 5 defensive BPR for 12.74. That is more than a point ahead of the second place guy on our list. Not a transfer, but the preseason player of the year in the Big Ten in Braden Smith. So Yaxel Lendeberg, do-it-all forward, transfers to Michigan from UAB. He has been absolutely incredible to start the year for a Michigan team that's been near the top of the polls pretty much all season long. I think it would be hard to pick against him for Big Ten Player of the Year right now. I mean, he's averaging 14.5 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists per game for Michigan, and he's doing it on pretty efficient numbers as well. 53% shooting overall, 34.7% from 3, 86% at the free throw line, already put up about 3.25 win shares and a 27.5 player efficiency rating, which are absolutely incredible. 2-time All-American Conference player at UAB, certainly well on his way to earning all-conference honors in the Big Ten as well. It should be a fun race between him and, I would assume, Braden Smith for Big Ten Player of the Year down the stretch. Another guy that's been really good for Michigan out of the transfer portal, I think I also have to end up putting on this team. And there's really 3 options for Michigan. I'm only going to put 2 of them in the all-transfer team starting lineup. I'm going to go with Marez Johnson Jr., top 30 recruit before last season. He's averaging 14, 7, and 1 for Michigan right now. He is listed as the number 6 player in the Big Ten Conference by Evan Miyakawa. Actually a higher defensive BPR than his offensive, but very well-balanced profile with a total rating of 9.18, which again, per Evan Miyakawa, the number 6 player in the conference. Marez Johnson Jr. was pretty good in a bench role for Illinois last year, played in 30 games, started 8 of them, got about 18 minutes per game, shot 64%, didn't take a single three-pointer last year, only 62% of the free throw line, but again, in those 18 minutes per game, averaged 7 points, about 7 rebounds, and a block per game. This year, he's gone to a whole nother level. He's leading the Big Ten Conference in field goal percentage and effective field goal percentage, 67% overall. He hasn't taken many threes, but he's shooting 40% from distance on the year. He's averaged more than double the points, up at 14, kept his rebounding average the same as actually averaging even an assist per game with a full steal and about a block and a half per game as well. That's a guy that didn't get much usage at Illinois last year, kind of energy big off the bench. He has really grown and really blossomed into a key piece of what Michigan wants to do. I would argue probably the third head in that front court, but the statistical performance has been a little bit better than another transfer we'll get to from Michigan when we get to our bench and our honorable mention section. So the 2 Michigan guys out of the way. I'll get my Purdue guy out of the way here. Also in the front court, I'm going to go with Oscar Clough. And for those of you who have listened to this show before, Oscar Clough was one of my guys going into the year. I thought he was going to fit exactly what Purdue needed, and he's been as advertised. This is a guy that's leading the Big Ten in 2-point percentage at 75.5%. Hasn't stepped out and taken a 3 this year. He knows his job, knows his role. Started the 17 games he's played in for the Boilers, playing about 24 minutes per game in that deep front court. Not averaging as many points or as many rebounds as he was at South Dakota State, where he transferred in from. He's down, what would that be, about 6 points per game and about 4 rebounds per game, but also in fewer minutes per game, and he's not the feature option for Purdue. He's still been so good, though, in his role. Evan Miyakawa has Oscar Clough as the number 3 player in the Big Ten Conference behind Yaxel Lendeberg and Clough's teammate Braden Smith. Somehow Clough's offensive BPR is up at 7. His defensive BPR is about 2.5. I would have guessed those numbers would have been closer to maybe like 5 and 3 or 5 and 4. But Oscar Clough has been so efficient offensively, a terrifying second option in the front court behind Trey Kaufman-Renn. Has fit hand in glove into that Purdue scheme offensively and has provided at least some deterrence at the rim. Not averaging quite a full block per game, but I think just his presence, the way that he rotates, he's a better defender, I think, in both individual and team situations than Trey Kaufman-Renn, despite not having the same natural height and length as a guy like Daniel Jacobson does holding down the middle for Purdue. But I think Oscar Clough has been as advertised. I think he's been really good for Purdue, and he ends up taking the 3rd spot in the front court. And this is where it's a little positionless, but I do think that that's okay for the Big Ten all-transfer team. I will throw a true point guard on there in Bennett Sturtz. He's been really good for an Iowa team that the net ratings really seem to love. Started all 17 games, playing a bunch of minutes like he always does, 35.4, which is actually down from the 39.4 he led college basketball with by playing last year. The jump from Division II to Drake to Iowa, none of them have really held him back. He's still averaging just shy of 18 points per game, as well as 5 assists as the engine of that Iowa offense. Steal per game, about a 2.5 or 3 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Shooting really well. I mean, 58% from 2, 38% from 3, and 82% at the free throw line. Bennett Sturtz has been the player we all expected him to be. Has struggled at times. In fact, Iowa played a little bit better against Purdue with Bennett Sturtz on the bench, but that's usually the outlier for a guy of his caliber. He's been really good, and if I'm putting this all-transfer team together and need some guards, he's been far and away the best true ball handler, I would say, from the transfer class. But that's not to say he's been the best guard overall. Maybe he's a wing, maybe he's a forward. I don't know how you want to describe him, but I have to throw Price Sanford in here in the mix for best transfers, maybe in the country, but certainly in the Big Ten. Price Sanford has almost doubled his points per game from Iowa. He averaged 8.8 last year. He's up at 16.4 this year. He's also averaging a career best 4.5 rebounds per game, career best 2 and change assists per game, over a steal per game. First time in his career he's done that. And he's still taking care of the ball pretty darn well. Over a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, defending without fouling for the most part. Only shooting, quote unquote, shooting 60% from 2. Still pretty darn good. But how about this? Price Sanford on 8 attempts per game from long range for Nebraska through 17 games is hitting about 3 of them. He's shooting an even 40% from 3. Been exactly what Nebraska needed as the infusion of offense out of the transfer portal. He has been probably the best fit, pure fit, maybe the best dollar-for-dollar transfer in the Big Ten because he's brought exactly what Nebraska needs. Incredible shooting, elite shooting, in fact, and even some of that ability that Fred Hoiberg and his staff believed in that he didn't get to show at Iowa in terms of handling the ball. The two-man, action between Price Sanford and Rink Mast, where Price Sanford can get downhill, mostly to score, but occasionally to drive and dish as well, has been really good. It's been consistent for Nebraska. Price Sanford, I don't think Nebraska, could ask anything more from him. He has been the player that I think that coaching staff expected and has probably exceeded what fans thought. I mean, Price Sanford this year has taken 136 threes already through 17 games, made 55. Last year at Iowa, in 33 games, Price Sanford took 140 threes and made 56. So I would guess when Nebraska travels to Northwestern on Saturday, Price Sanford will eclipse both the attempts for 3 in just his 18th game and the number of makes, again, in just his 18th game compared to the 33 games it took him to get there last year. So Price Sanford has been worth it and then some for Nebraska. You see why why Fred Hoiberg and company really wanted him the first go-around. It was hard to pry him out of the state and the chance to play with his older brother, Peyton, at Iowa for a couple years. But, man, once Price entered the transfer portal, Nebraska was all over him again and ended up getting him to commit. It's been worth every penny and more for Nebraska. Price Sanford, by the way, in the Big Ten, ranks as the number 12 player in Evan Miyakawa's ratings, right behind a guy that I would throw on my bench in terms of the all-transfer team, Elliot Cadeau. I'm not an Elliot Cadeau guy necessarily. I mean, his ability to pass with both hands off a live dribble and run the show is incredible. That's a former ACC all-freshman team. He's averaging, I believe, a career best, 9.6 points per game, 5 assists per game. Turnovers are still relatively low. I mean, 2.5-ish assist to turnover ratio is pretty darn good for a lead guard. The three-point shooting has also been really good. He went from 19% as a freshman to 33 and change as a sophomore, both at North Carolina, now at Michigan. On the most volume of his career, 4 attempts per game, he's knocking down about 41% of them. His free throw numbers, though, are pretty lacking, which leads you to believe he might just be in the middle of a hot streak. Kind of rare that you see a guy shoot, relatively better from three than from the free throw line. So I would expect Elliot Cadeau's three-point shooting numbers to go down, except that Michigan doesn't ask him to take a lot of tough ones. They play so much through their front court, and when they're playing through Lendeberg and Mara, who we'll get to in a minute, and Morez Johnson, Elliot Cadeau, can drive and dish in the pick and roll. He can relocate, set his feet in a corner, and knock him down. Or he can give the ball off an entry pass to Axel Lendeberg, relocate, and hit from the wing or the slot. So maybe it's more real than I want to give it credit for. Wouldn't surprise me if Elliot Cadeau ends the year, closer to 36%, 35% maybe, because I just don't think 4 attempts per game is what he's comfortable doing. I think teams will start daring him to beat them. Not necessarily what Wisconsin did. That was just such a track meet and a fun game that we need to talk more about. Probably around Nebraska and Michigan, just to see how the Badgers were able to hand the Wolverines their first loss of the year. The other bench guys that I would throw in, Ade Mara has been incredible defensively for Michigan. Maybe the overall impact, now you would quite think. I mean, he's the 17th best player in the Big Ten, according to the numbers by Evan Miyakawa. Probably means more to Michigan than even the numbers might indicate. I mean, you have a 7'3" guy with his wingspan, relative athleticism, and ability to throw outlet passes after gobbling up rebounds. I think Ade Mara has been more impactful than the 17th best player. I think he's kind of the linchpin for a lot of what Michigan wants to do, especially defensively. Then I would also throw Chad Baker-Mazara on my bench for a USC team that is your normal Eric Musselman, ragtag crew, island of misfit toys. With Rodney Rice down, that's a guy whose impact, I think, way outweighs what he's been, maybe statistically from a site like Evan Miyakawa's. I think that USC's slide really coincides with Rodney Rice going down and being lost for the year. Chad Baker-Mazara should be, a borderline All-Big Ten player. It's like his 17th year in college. Just refuses to go get on LinkedIn or even, go pro overseas or whatever. He's been good, not overwhelming, but I think if you look at the team, you could find space for another wing like Chad Baker-Mazara, which is why I threw him in there kind of as my backup wing behind maybe like a Price Sanford or a Axel Lendeberg, and why Cadeau would probably be my backup to Bennett Sturtz, and Mara my backup big. We'll wrap up this segment with this, kind of the honorable mentions and the disappointment. So Rodney Rice, right, honorable mention, like I talked about. Lamar Wilkerson from Indiana shooting the cover off the ball, has dropped 40 in a game this year, has been probably the best player on Indiana's team. Maybe Tucker DeVries, if you look at the overall impact, certainly more balanced, but I think for what Darian DeVries has wanted to accomplish, Lamar Wilkerson has really set the tone. Some guys that have been mild disappointments. Desmond Claude going from Washington to USC, from USC to Washington, rather, hasn't really stood out. Hasn't been the story for Washington. Hasn't felt like he's had the same impact for the Huskies, maybe as he did down in Los Angeles. I mean, the numbers this year for him are pretty much in line with what he's done. A couple points per game less right now. Way fewer assists per game. He averaged 4.2 per game last year, less than 2 assists per game this year. Rebounding numbers are reduced, relatively stable, but not the worst. Free throw numbers have trended up. 2-point percentage, similar volume, but numbers are down. In his three-point shooting has never really come around, only shooting 30% from three. Hasn't even started every game for Washington. Some of that was dealing with an injury. He's only played in 12 games and started 9 of them, but I did expect more from Desmond Claude. I would also say this maybe it's not a disappointment, but I might have expected a little bit more. I mean, Andrei Stojakovic is now in his third school. He's averaging 14 points per game. Still can't buy a bucket from long range, only shooting 22%. 80% from the free throw line leads me to believe he's maybe a better shooter or has potential to be. But for this Illinois team, I just feel like as good as they've been, Andrei Stojakovic is probably the highest rated guy. Hasn't really stood out. Yeah, I mean, he's one of just 2 top 100 recruits on the team. We know that Illinois has gone overseas for a lot of their talent, but as a junior, I would have expected Illinois to, in some ways, go as he goes on offense. Kylan Boswell being a senior, helping set the tone is big too. But Illinois has been the Keaton Wagler show. I mean, Wagler's averaging 2.5 more points per game, more rebounds, and more assists. He's been absolutely electric. And that's why I don't want to say that Stojakovic has been a disappointment. I'm just maybe a little surprised that his numbers aren't better or that he's not a bigger, more focal piece of what they want to do. He's kind of averaged a quiet 14 points per game, and I didn't necessarily see that coming. The other disappointments on my list, Xavier Booker and Donovan Dent from UCLA. UCLA has not been good this year. They have not been a fun watch. I thought this roster was going to fit together better on the offensive end. It just hasn't clicked for them down there, and they're not playing the type of defense as a more offensive-minded roster, that Mick Cronin would like. I thought Donovan Dent was going to be all but a shoo-in for all Big Ten honors. He's got a major uphill battle to make it even to the third team right now. And I thought Xavier Booker was going to be a good change of scenery guy from Michigan State. He just has not impressed me. And, I think in terms of overall impact, Xavier Booker is down, out of 166 qualified players. I think Xavier Booker per Evan Miyakawa, I have it right here. Yeah, he's way down at the bottom. He's the 157th rated player that qualifies in the entire Big Ten per Evan Miyakawa. This is a guy who's been around college basketball, who's played his fair share, is a change of scenery type of guy that I thought was going to finally be able to do something, but he has been a net negative on offense and even bigger negative on defense. And to be a bottom 10 player in the Big Ten is just absolutely astounding to me. Donovan Dent hasn't been quite that bad. I mean, not even close to that bad, right? He's been perfectly fine. But that's a guy I thought was going to have a huge impact on UCLA's fortunes. And instead, he's averaging 12-6 in 3, 41% overall, and not a typo, friends, not a typo. He is shooting 9% from 3. A lead guard in a power conference in the year of our Lord, 2026, has taken 22 threes in 16 games and has only made 2 of them. He's only gotten to the free throw line about 5 times per game. He's shooting 61% there. He's taken 156 shots from 2, only shooting 45% on those after being above 50% in the previous 3 years for a really good New Mexico team and program. I've been let down by Donovan Dent. I was a firm believer that he'd be special in the Big Ten. That has not come to fruition. What did come to fruition, an incredible Wednesday night in college hoops. We'll talk about that and get you set up for the weekend. That's ahead next on the Corner 3.
Winter is just around the corner. Is your vehicle ready? Don't get left out in the cold. At A1 Automotive, we prep your car for whatever winter throws your way here in Nebraska. For battery checks, to brake inspections, tires, heaters, whatever your car needs to keep you and your family safe on the road, we've got you covered. A1 Automotive, always honest answers.
Hi, nice to meet you. Can I have that? Hang out over here for a second. Corner 3!
You gotta get out there, Cleveland.
I'm trying. He's taking advantage of poor technology.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
All right, let's wrap it up. Another edition here of the Corner 3 podcast. As always, give the show a follow at Austin_Oerman. That's my Twitter handle. Interact with the show there. I mentioned a wild Wednesday night in college hoops. We'll go ahead and start in the Big Ten, move on to the SEC, and get you set up for Nebraska and Northwestern coming up tomorrow. So in the Big Ten, Purdue got down by 9 points with about 15 minutes to go, and then retook the lead about 5 minutes later thanks to Braden Smith. Preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, scored all 16 of his points in the second half. Also, I ended up matching Cassius Winston, in assists in Big Ten games, 478 of them. Ties him with Cassius Winston, so he'll pass him with the next time he assists on a bucket. Iowa, again, pushes it to a 9-point lead at 48-39, about 14 and a half minutes to go. Purdue retakes the lead with about 9.5 minutes left in that one. Bennett Sturts leads the way for for Iowa with 19 points. Cale Combs ends up with 16 of them. Iowa loses their third game in a row. They're 0-4 against ranked teams this year and have lost 10 straight games against top 10 opponents. This one in Mackey, a valiant effort for the Hawks, who led it by 3 at the break and, like I said, pushed it to 9. But Iowa now just 2-4 in the Big Ten. They're a game back of teams like Indiana, Ohio State, Minnesota, and USC, who are all 3-3 in Big Ten games. Far from the cellar, though, as there are still 3 winless teams in Big Ten conference play: Penn State, Northwestern, and Maryland, and then you have Oregon at 1-5. Not the company Iowa wants to necessarily keep. I think the numbers have maybe gotten out ahead of the Hawkeyes a little bit. They've destroyed their Quad 4 competition, but really struggled against the higher-level teams. I'm sure Iowa will pick off a team or two at Carver Hawkeye this year, hoping it's not Nebraska. But I think Iowa's plenty good enough, plenty talented enough. Bennett Sturts might just take over. And the pace that they play is slower pace. It just takes one night, right? 40 minutes, Iowa can grind you down potentially. But for now, a disappointing win for the Hawkeyes, and Purdue continues to make history behind Braden Smith. And the Boilers move to 6-0, tied with Nebraska now at the top of the Big Ten standings. Wild night in the SEC. I'll talk about Texas taking down hitherto undefeated Vanderbilt 80-64 in Austin. Modest Vokatitis had 22, Tremont Mark 21, and Dalen Swain 14, 9, and 7. For Texas, who's now won back-to-back SEC games against ranked opponents, they beat 13th-ranked Alabama on Saturday before hosting Vanderbilt and really dominating that game in the second half, in large part due to the defense. Tyler Tanner dropped 17, Duke Miles has 21, but in the second half, Vandy shoots just 27% overall, 37% for the game. Vandy was hot from 3 in the first half. They went 8 of 15 from range. In the second half, though, only 10 three-point attempts, not a whole lot for a team like Vandy, and they only went 1 for 10, finishing the day 9 for 25, which is not a terrible percentage at 36%, but when you get beat on the boards and beat up inside by a guy like Vokatitis, and if Dalen Swain was having his way like it looked like he was, Texas led it by 5 at the break and then dominated, winning the second half by 11. So there's another undefeated down. Also Wednesday night, Arizona State led by a point at the half in Tucson, but Arizona comes back. A little bit of nonsense late, but the Wildcats restore order. So top-ranked Indiana remains undefeated. Back to the SEC now. How about this? Ole Miss goes on the road, one of the bigger disappointments potentially of the year. Notches a road win over Georgia. These two teams were trending in different directions early in the year, right? I mean, Ole Miss with Chris Beard, A.J. Storr in town, kind of thought they were going to be the high-flying offense. They're averaging just 75 points per game. Last in the SEC. The flip side of that is Georgia, leading the country, averaging 96 points per game. This one certainly played at Georgia's pace. The 21st-ranked Bulldogs at home actually get upset behind 27 points from A.J. Storr, who I believe came off the bench in that one. A guy by the name of Patton Pinkins. Yeah, mark that one down on your bingo card. Patton Pinkins hits a go-ahead offensive rebound kind of put back with just a second and change to go in overtime. So Ole Miss takes down Georgia 97-95. Both these teams now sit at 2-2 in SEC play. LSU had a chance to get off the schneid to get its first conference win of the season. How about this? They lead Kentucky by 18 points in Baton Rouge. Kentucky crawls back possession by possession. They didn't just pack it in like the Cats have been wanting to do at times this year. But LSU says, you know what, we're gonna buck up, we're gonna make a stand. They force a shot clock violation off another one of my guys from earlier in the year, Otega Owe. Owe says, you know what, give me another chance, I'll make something happen. He splits his pair of free throws with 5 seconds to go. LSU gets fouled. They go to the line with a second and a half left, leading by 1, and that's why it's important about Owe. Had a chance to tie the game, didn't do it, right? Split his free throws, so Kentucky's down 1. They have to foul LSU. They do. LSU misses both free throws, and Kentucky snags the rebound. They call timeout, and then I think they close the loop on Christian Laettner. The 92 Elite Eight, right? The full court pass from Hill to Laettner. That looks almost exactly like what it was Kentucky was going for. Now, in the postgame, they said they were trying to get it to Otega Owe up the sideline to give him a chance, but this ball ended up, instead of on the right sideline, it ended up at the left elbow. Other than that, I mean, it looked eerily similar to the Laettner shot. Moreno gives a little fake, doesn't have time to take a dribble like Laettner, and turns around and sinks it. Moreno's not really a shooter, not a bunch of range. It was a kind of deep mid-range shot just past the elbow, but Kentucky crawls back from the brink. They get their miracle in Baton Rouge, and who knows if that's the spark for Kentucky. I've thought they've had a chance for something to be a spark at multiple points throughout the year, but maybe it's a last gasp, dig deep effort hit by an unlikely hero in Malachi Moreno, who high-pointed that ball, turns around, and cashes the shot from the mid-range to win at 75-74 for the Wildcats over the Tigers. Maybe that's the spark that they are looking for. So Nebraska and Northwestern will close us out. Huskers still undefeated. They head on the road to Welsh Ryan Arena. They've had some struggles in there. Northwestern led by one of the best scorers in the country, just brutally efficient inside, is a Nick Martinelli. Improving outside game, not a huge feature of what he wants to do. I do think it's a decent matchup for Nebraska. Northwestern's guards don't really threaten or scare anyone, and I think that a guy like Berke Boyichenjel or even at times Braden Frager can be a decent matchup for Nebraska defensively against Northwestern. But, you know, it's a one-game road trip after a 35-point win for Nebraska over Oregon. They'll just make a quick trip out to Evanston and then hop right back home to get ready to take on an okay Washington team. There's no excuse for Nebraska to lose this game. Wouldn't shock me if Nebraska tries to sleepwalk through the first half and has to win it late. I don't think this Northwestern team is playing very well right now, still winless in the Big Ten. They've lost some heartbreakers. They've been, playing teams tough, especially in that building. But I have no reason to think Nebraska won't find a way to keep the Wildcats at arm's length, move to 18-0 and 17-0 in the Big Ten. That'll do it for this episode of The Corner 3. Again, really appreciate everyone who is listening to the podcast. Give me a follow on Twitter at Austin_Oerman. I'll be back for post-game coverage tomorrow after Nebraska and Northwestern, and then throughout the rest of the year. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com.
On the internet.
KNTK FM Firth, 93.7.